per se something that has a lot of challenges in place. But a unique challenge here in all this segment of challenges is selecting the right IOL power for these pediatric patients. The reason for this challenge is because on the one hand, it's a very, very important decision that we are trying to make. What we do today is not only going to influence the visual outcome today, it's also going to affect his visual performance and development in future, and thereby influence not only his social, psychological, but many other factors. So it's a very important decision we are making, but for that, it's almost like we are trying to shoot at a moving target and we don't even know where the target is going. So with all of these challenges in place, what is it exactly that we are trying to face? First thing, our challenge is that we are not always able to accurately measure the biometry and keratometry. Even if we did manage to measure them accurately, we are definitely knowing for sure that they are going to change. And with these uncertainties, we have to make a predictive plan today such that when this child grows up, he lands up as close to emmetropia as possible when he needs his vision to be good, at least at the school-going age. Now, if we wanted to address all these things, what I share with you here on is what we know best in technology and literature today to address these questions. The problem with accuracy in measurements is because all of this is being done under general anesthesia with an anesthetist breathing down your neck, wanting you to finish fast so he can attend another call. What you want to do is take your time. Be prepared when the baby is being induced. Have everyone ready, have all the instruments ready. Inherently, handheld keratometry is not the most precise way of measuring keratometry, but we have no other option. So try to take as many readings and ensure at least 2 readings as close to 1 diopter difference as possible. But I think the most important key thing here is have the same person do it. We don't want 7, 8 different people trying different things different times. So the same person who is habituated to holding the keratometry aligned with the visual axis, allow that person to do it the same time. The same person doing it will also minimize the error in calculations. In any case of doubt, we have many pediatric surgeons who have published data where you can verify as to which kind of keratometry value you can expect at that age group. In terms of measuring the biometry, many of us have been using contact biometers for these children, but I think now enough and more research have been published saying that we need to use immersion A scans. Smaller shells are available for these pediatric eyes. A lot of publication has happened, and most importantly, we all know they are already short eyes. The more indentation, more inaccuracy, the more you are going to likely end up in an error, and you're going to induce myopia right away, which is something that you don't want at all. So upgrading to immersion A scan is very, very important. We know that all this that you're measuring today is going to change in the process of ocular growth, and that's inherent to every eye, every normal eye, and this eye too. And all of this emmetropization process happens with a myopic shift. This causes changing in refraction, and with this, what you want to now ask yourself is that what is the most important factor you will take into consideration when you hypothesize how much of the change is going to happen in this child today. Age remains today the most important factor to take into consideration. It's the age of the child which is going to decide how much is it likely to change. Even a normal eye, a normal child, has maximum axial growth in about first 2 years of life. As you can see here, that eye still keeps growing, but maximum growth happens in the first 2 years of that life. But what we are trying to address today is, do we expect anything differently following cataract surgery? Yes. These childs and these eyes don't behave similarly to a normal eye. We have found that there is a higher accelerated axial growth in child when he's operated when his age was less than 1 year of age. So when the child operated is less than 1 year of age, you want to compensate for that higher axial growth. Also, aphakic eyes are known to have accelerated axial growth compared to pseudophakic eyes. And the hypothesis here is that it's the visual deprivation which causes this, and you want to take that into consideration. Unilateral pseudophakia, when a child has unilateral cataract and you're going to operate only one eye, then you can expect that eye to actually undergo a myopic shift more than the other eye. So these are the factors you want to keep in mind when you are formulating a predictive plan for this child's future. When you want to do this, first decision that you need to take now is how much of post-op refraction will you plan today? In other words, what's your target refraction? Now here you have 2 options. If you try to keep this child emmetropic, then he'll have good vision for about 1 or 2 years. But eventually, as the axial growth happens, he's going to end up having a very, very high myopia by the time he reaches his school-going age. On the other hand, if you anticipate that myopic shift and keep it hyperopic, then if you don't manage this hyperopia, if you don't ensure that the parents are counseled enough, the child is brought back for regular follow-ups, the child is made to use either glasses or contact lens, unless you ensure his visual stimulation, he's going to end up in a dense amblyopia even if he's not going to be myopic later. So with all of these factors in place, you want to weigh the pros and cons such that you have less chances of amblyopia, less chances of a lot of residual refractive error at the school going age, and thereby you need to strike a number. So how do you decide on that number? You need to undercorrect, but by how much? Who tells you how much to undercorrect? And here is where all these other factors come into play. Younger the age of the child, more you need to undercorrect. If the axial length is already more compared to what you would have expected in a normal child of that age, then you anticipate more of axial growth happening, more myopization, hence more of undercorrection compared to other child with cataract. Laterality, when I say that, what I mean is unilateral versus bilateral cataract. A child who has a unilateral cataract is likely to have more accelerated growth in that eye compared to the one who has bilateral cataracts. So with all of these considerations, we have certain IOL strategies of how to plan a target refraction. Many surgeons have shared their views, and some of them are really useful in our own practice. Elie Dahan and team have suggested that they would prefer to have axial length as a barometer for deciding their IOL power. So when, for example, when they feel that the axial length is 17, they would absolutely implant 28 diopter of IOL. That's what has worked in their hands. That's what has been published, and they find that this strategy is good. Many other surgeons have preferred to keep age as a barometer, and I personally feel that that's a more accurate way of determining the IOL power calculation. So for example, this is also known as the rule of 8. So if the child's age was 3 years of age, then his planned residual hyperopia for +5 diopter. The total of the two would be 8. So the rule of 8 is what has been published by them. Trivedi and Wilson have also found something very similar, rule of 7 or 8. We personally at Raghudeep Eye Hospital prefer to have a little more neutral way of doing it. We again follow the age nomogram. We undercorrect by percentage. So younger the age, more of the undercorrection. But with all of that, let's say we decided to keep this child hyperopic by +5 diopters. Then which IOL calculation formula do I trust to land me with +5? That's the question. Which IOL calculation formula can you use and will give you a predictable result? Unfortunately, if you look into the literature, practically every other literature has some or the other calculation formula that they worked, that they found to be dependable. How do you decide? The inherent problem is that most of these publications are retrospective analysis. Very obviously, that's going to happen. How much of a study population do you expect a pediatric cataract surgeon to have? So it's a small study population. Also, a very varied age group of children, child of 1 month age group and child of 7 years are all in one study population where there is a differing surgical strategy, maybe even differing IOL placement. So all of these confounding factors, and the most important confounding factors is that none of these calculation formulas were actually devised for a pediatric eye. They were all devised for an adult eye, and we know that not only physiologically, but even physical content-wise, the pediatric eye behaves very differently. Take vitreous for an example. The adult vitreous physical content consistency is so very different from a pediatric vitreous. So these IOL calculation formulas have not been, performing as well for these pediatric eyes that we have been seeing them doing so fantastically for the adult eyes. So a lot of surgeons even tried personalizing A constant, but none of that worked. So for our own satisfaction and clarity, we conducted this study in a prospective manner where we calculated and we compared 4 most commonly used ADL calculation formulas like Holiday 1, 2, Hoffer Q, and SRKT with and without personalizing A constant. Fortunately, we had quite a robust study population, about 117 eyes with half the population in less than 2 years of age. And when we looked at the result, the prediction error within 2 diopters, which is considered acceptable in a pediatric population, most of the IOL calculation formulas did reasonably well. But if you look at the predicted error, that's where the catch is. The difference between what you targeted and what you actually got, that predicted error was found to be least in SRKT in Holiday 2. So what we found was that not only did these 2 IOL calculation formulas perform significantly better, but personalizing A constant again did not make too much of a difference. So in a nutshell, a lot of other people have also found similarly where they lean towards Holiday 2. But the main crux is that there is no other option but to ensure that you have as proper biometry and keratometry as possible. If you begin with something accurate, you're likely to land up in a more accurate position. If you have accurate parameters to work with, then estimating right factors for ocular growth will again help you plan better. We need to undercorrect, that's the rule of the day, because you want this child to land into emmetropia or as close to emmetropia as possible eventually. And the good news is that if you have access to Holiday 2, it would be great, but even SRKT works quite well, so it's easily accessible to everyone. Thank you so much.